Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest, or two in this case, because I recently spoke to Vicki Peterson and also John Cowsill to find out more about their latest project. This is an album titled Long After the Fire that has just been released April 2025. Available streaming and also just buy a copy. I will also put a link to their website in the notes below because they have got some live dates and some new information. This is an album of Americana songs written by John's late brothers Barry and Bill. So you'll find out more about that as well as their life in music and much, much more. So look, after several minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to the exciting subject that was the early formative years. And this is going to be Vicki speaking first.
Well, we have similar timelines. We're about 3 years apart in age, but I think both of us, well, actually, no, John will probably have a different story. For me, it really was the Beatles, I have to say, and the British invasion. I had an older sister, and she tuned into that and brought me and my younger sister and my brother along with her, just loving, the British fans of the 60s, mostly. And then from there, I went to singer-songwriters in the 70s in America, the sort of Laurel Canyon scene. So that's when I started writing songs as a 9-year-old. So it was but it really started with British pop and rock.
Right, so it was the British invasion. And what was your first gig that you went to?
It was Carole King at the Greek Theater with my older sister, actually, in Los Angeles.
Carole King was your first concert?
Yeah.
Wow.
Between Carole King and Creedence Clearwater.
Clearwater.
Wow.
My dad took me to that one.
My God.
Carole King, that was Tapestry Day.
Yes.
That was
awesome. In the day.
There you go. So you went through that whole period of Jackson Browne, Joni Mitchell.
Yeah, I love Joni Mitchell. I mean, that was the thing. But John has similar, your Beatles thing, I would say, but then you had some pre-Beatles stuff too.
Well, of course. I mean, the Beach Boys were before the Beatles for me. So
yes,
but like 2 days before, really.
Yeah, the year before.
Yeah, because the Beach Boys were 61 and Beatles were 62.
64 for us in America.
Right. But I was listening to Ricky Nelson stuff, before the Beatles came on, because of my older brothers. I'm the sixth youngest boy in my family, so I had 5 older brothers, and you get the bleed of their music. So
yes, you do get the bleed.
Bonnie Francis, Roy Orbison. My first musical lust was Marty Robbins' El Paso, but that was 5 then. But then the Beatles came on, and that changed everybody's life who's our age, in our age group.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yes.
So again, all the British invasion, but then the 70s did come in, and I was a huge Elton John fan, Stevie Wonder. Yes, I like the Mellow Mafia music, which is the Jackson Brownes, the Joni Mitchells. I mean, it was such a palette of music going on. At every turn, it was just happening so quick. But those are...
There you go. That was because I had an older brother, but he was 7 years older than me. But he had the prog rock period, so I used to sneak into his room to listen to all these very interesting, bizarre triple albums, double albums.
Prog as well.
That's fun for you.
Yes,
you liked prog.
I love the band Flash, who was pre-Yes. I liked the Pigeons, which was Vanilla Fudge before they were Vanilla Fudge. I've been in the music business so long. I was 7 and 8 years old playing bars 4 sets a night.
Right, my God, you were really working it hard, actually. Yeah, so what was the punk period like for you, Vicki?
Oh, I also came in late because, of course, Los Angeles, we got it a few years later than y'all had it, and so it really wasn't for me. It wasn't until the 76. Really 76, I'd say, that I went to, there was a club in Hollywood called The Mask, and it was the premier punk rock club. And it was like our cabin club. It was down at set of stairs. It was this, moldy basement that was, with moisture dripping down the ceiling and that kind of thing. And that's where all the punks hung out. So I went there a couple of times with some friends who were sort of steering us into that world. And we met this band, the Alley Cats, who were LA based. And for whatever reason, they kind of took a liking to my best girlfriend and me and my sister Debbie, because we had a band at the time. We're still in high school. And they kind of took us under their wings and had us actually play with them a couple of times. So we played shows with punk rock bands in the late 70s. And we were not a punk band. We were definitely a pop band for sure.
Right. Yes.
Like a power pop band, really. So
were people like Graham Parker and Elvis Costello and Joe Jackson? Did they come onto your?
Absolutely. Oh yeah, huge. And I feel fortunate that we were, in the 80s, got a chance to meet Elvis Costello and play with him a number of times, actually, several times. And then even in the 20th century, we recorded one of his songs. It's a Doll Revolution, Tear Off Your Own Head. And that was the name of, that was the title track of a Bangles album that came out in 2003.
Right.
That was an Elvis Costello song that inspired us. So we played with him around that time. We sang with him on stage.
Yes.
So great. What an amazing.
Yes, well, I remember seeing him live. They had the Pogues supporting at the time, and I remember thinking, they're a good band, but they probably won't do very well. But then, obviously, the Pogues became huge in the UK.
And that was the Pogues, did you say?
Yeah, they were supporting Elvis Costello once. So that was kind of my first time I saw Elvis. And then I saw him again at Glastonbury Festival and was like, my God, this guy's amazing, So his 80s work was particularly incredible. So how did you navigate the 80s? Because there was the punk period, there was post-punk. Then you had that kind of, you had hair metal. And for me, I was a real indie pop kid. I loved the Smiths. I loved all those kind of bands like Big Country and yes, I suppose, in a way I did like U2 as well. But how did you navigate the 80s? Because obviously this was a decade that you absolutely kind of blossomed, really, didn't you? It
was big, but it began with, again, a love of the 60s. And that's how I bonded with Susanna Hoffs. Debbie and I and Susanna all were obsessed with the 60s, with the fashion, with the art, with the music of that time. And you have to understand that was very much out of step with our contemporaries, because this is the 80s now, and the 60s weren't particularly cool yet. Nobody was really talking about it or thinking about it, except for a group of friends that we met and bands in Los Angeles. And we started playing with them and performing with them. And that's what became known as the Paisley Underground. So it was bands like the Rain Parade and the 3 O'Clock and the Dream Syndicate. And we became just very fast friends. So that's where we really started in the 80s. And then from then we went on the road basically for most of the decade. And we'd come home and the Sunset Strip had changed completely because it had turned into hair metal, which I only enjoyed ironically, I'll say. Fun/stupid. And, it's not that but we had the hair. I mean, I think at one point Cream magazine said that the Bangles were the band with the biggest hair, who weren't metal, the biggest non-metal band with the biggest hair. Pretty much, hair. We did. We went big with the hairspray. Oh,
yes. Yeah. And most bands, because when I've done so many interviews with bands, especially from the 80s, and it was kind of interesting because I sort of realised there's like a 5-year narrative. There was like a 12-month honeymoon period. The first single, and there was a bit of airplay. And we had John Peel. There was also the NME Science Melody Maker. You get that little bit of traction. And the UK is tiny, as you can imagine, as you probably experienced. And, every little city and town had an indie night. And so people would get in their transit van, they'd go around, they get the first album. And then there was that kind of the second, possibly, and then possibly a third. And it was all going terribly well. And then suddenly it all explodes. What was your kind of experience like of that kind of...
With the UK?
Well, not just the UK, but with the band during the 80s. You're sort of...
Yeah. The UK was very specific in that way, too, I think, in that we were sort of a curiosity when we first came over, and the press was quite kind and curious in the beginning. And I feel like they kind of turned on us quite quickly. As soon as we had a hit, we were no longer cool. And that tends to happen. That happens with like hometown bands. when you build a following, you are playing clubs, they are packed. You go on the road, you have a hit single, you're now playing, theaters and stadiums in other cities. You come home to play a place in your own town, and people are like, yeah, whatever, show me, because they feel like you left them. I think there's a sense of proprietorship, like you, we discovered you, we made you, you left us.
That's childish.
You know what I mean? But I think you've experienced it too. You have experienced it too. So
well, yes.
I don't even remember what your question was.
The narrative of a band, I suppose it's quite tricky, because I know a few people have just said by the time we got our third or fourth album, our fans had also moved on. They were getting older. They were needing to sort of focus on other things. So suddenly there wasn't that crowd. And sometimes I don't know what it was like. What was the atmosphere like when you were doing your third album?
For the Bangles, interestingly, we kind of bowed out at the top. We had just had a number one single. We released another single that was climbing the charts when we left. And when we said, okay, we're out, see ya for, a few years. We took 9 years off. It was a extended vacation.
Yes, I mean, yes, the 90s was quite interesting because we had Britpop then. And what was your 80s like, John? How did you navigate your 80s?
Oh, that's interesting, because you...
what did I do in the 80s? Yeah.
You started off with...
Well, I was playing drums for a band called Jan and Dean.
Oh, yes.
Dwight Twilley first, and then...
Oh, yeah. First, I played drums for Dwight Twilley through the early 80s, and then I got on a gig with Jan and Dean. I didn't know how to get a gig because I always had one my whole life. So if I didn't have one, I just would go do something else.
Didn't go looking for one.
go cap shampoo bottles at a factory or become a builder. I don't know. But I did hook up with Jan and Dean. Dean Torrance was doing some spring break gigs with Mike Love. And I got involved with that somehow, some friends in Santa Barbara. And I did that. And then I got married. And then it wasn't working out so well. And I thought if I got off the road, there was like this weird thing, poor decisions in my 80s. And for 13 years, I kind of didn't do anything.
Isn't that crazy?
It's just,
yes.
You have a blank in your
But I had
musical.
two great kids and from that marriage. But then I put a call out. I wanted to work again because the divorce wasn't working out. And I got a call one night. I'm sitting on my couch. I'm trying to find a way to make some fast money. So we have these things called infomercials here in the United States. Late at night, they come on and they're yelling at you. You got to get this. You got to do this. You're missing out if you don't do that.
Oh, was that Tony Robbins?
Yeah, somebody was. I had a child in each room. It was my turn to have the kids. And this guy comes on selling Tiger Wood cards.
Like trading cards.
You get 8 cards. You're going to make thousands of dollars on this. Like I was broke. And so I bought those cards with a credit card. And then the next morning I woke up and I told my nephew, who's a trader, I said, hey man, I got these cards. What are they worth? He says, Uncle John, what did you do? I said, I paid like $1,000 for these. He said, they're not worth $100. Like,
right.
I still have the cards in a filing cabinet.
You never know. One day they might be.
One day, yes, they could be on eBay.
Well, they said if Tiger Woods ever did anything, which he didn't, so it was fine. Well, but then after that, I got a call one night sitting on my couch to go from a guy who I used to play with Jan and Dean in, and I hadn't talked to him in years, like 10 years. And as soon as he got on the phone, I said, they want something. I said, so what's up? He says, can I get to the airport?
Now.
Tonight. It's like it's 10 o'clock at night. I got 2 kids in bed. I said, no, I can't come there. I got 2 kids in bed. And he said, can you do it in the morning? I said, yes. And it was to go play drums for the Beach Boys. Their drummer had an in-ear problem, didn't want to go on the plane. So they called me and I went out there and I did a few dates on drums with them. And then all the guys in the band, hey man, do you play anything else? Can you sub for me? Can you do this? And I went, well, yeah, I mean, what do you want? So I went out and played guitar with them for a couple of months for a couple of guys, and they hired me because they sang, or I subbed out for that. But then after that, it was over, and probably a year went by, and somebody called up and said, "Hey, Jackie Love's looking for a person who sings the high parts in the Beach Boys. Do you want to, put a tape together and send it to them?" I said, "Okay, I can do that."
It's Mike Love's wife.
Mike Love's wife.
Right.
And so I put this thing together, and she wanted to talk to me on the phone. She's asking my birth sign and astrology stuff and going off. And
she's Jeannie.
And finally I said, "Does Mike know that you're calling me?" And she said, "No." I said, "You might want to run this by him," because I had done a few dates with him, and I was such an inappropriate prankster, just doing crazy stuff. So none of the things I'm going to tell you what I did here, but they were outrageous. And she said, "No." And that went down in history pretty funny to Mike. So another year went by, and then one of their members called me up and said, "Hey, can you sub for me for the summer? I cleared it. It's okay." So I went out to go play guitar with them, and I paid my rent with a credit card for 2 months so I could learn to play guitar, which I did not play very well at that time. And then a week before I go out, the person who contacted me to do this said, "Are you ready to go?" I said, "Yeah, as long as I don't have to play any lead parts. I'm just playing rhythm guitar," right? He paused. He says, "Oh, no, you're playing piano."
Oh, right. My God, that's casual.
I said, "I'm what?" He says, "Didn't anybody call you?" I said, "You are the only person I've had contact with through this whole thing. I didn't even know if this was real." So I called a friend, got some Beach Boy charts from him, and learned piano real quick. I do play piano, but I never played piano in a band. So my first gig, I go out with the Beach Boys, and I'm playing piano and singing with them. They really hired me to sing. And then 7 years into that, they hired me. They hired me a year into that. The audition period was over. And then after 7 years of playing piano with the Beach Boys, they moved me to drums, which was a good thing to do.
That's where he spent the 2000s.
Right. So there you go. So, did you tour outside America as well?
All the time. Every other year we were in Europe, and the UK was at the best audience. We played every racetrack.
Royal Albert Hall.
Did you play Glastonbury?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Just played everywhere in the UK. I mean, that's the best audience. We can play 3 hours in the UK with the Beach Boys.
Right.
Because we get to play all the album cuts. They're there to listen. The biggest fan base for the Beach Boys is the UK, no doubt.
Best audience.
Best.
So the best audience. Blimey, that was quite the gig. So then, as we trucked, well, actually going back then from the 80s, how did you then navigate your 90s, Vicki?
Oh, the 90s.
This is fun.
I know. I spent the 90s in New Orleans, actually, and at that point, the Bangles were on hold, and for all intents and purposes, in my past, and. But I met a group of friends, including John's sister, Susan, who I'd already known for 10 years or so at that point. And Susan and I started making music together as the Psycho Sisters. And we sort of were absorbed into this giant amoeba of a band called the Continental Drifters. And it was just a group of songwriters, really, a group of amazing songwriters. And so Susan and I just fell in love with these guys and ended up moving to New Orleans, playing in that band, and that's where I spent the 90s up until the year 2004, really 2003, with the Continental Drifters, and absolutely loving it. And that music was very different than what the Bangles were doing. It was, now we're talking about Americana before it existed. Nobody was calling it Americana yet, but that roots music, I would say, folk music, swamp pop. Because we had a very Louisiana base. Our drummer was from Louisiana. One of the early guitar players from Louisiana. And so it had this great sort of a swampy beat to it.
Like Little Feet,
Yes. Oh, Little Feet. Yes. Because I have to slightly confess here. I know it's such a confessional show. But yes, my parents didn't have great music taste. And I do remember them used to play country. And it slightly emotionally scarred me because it was like Boxcar Willie, Jim Reeves, people like that.
Oh, I love that. That's my jam.
This is so funny.
Oh, my God. I am as old as your parents. That's
how do you feel about it now?
So I then, during the 90s, there was like suddenly Gillian Welsh, Stacey Earle, Uncle Tupelo, and suddenly it was like, oh my God, I love all this.
Thank you. Yes.
Good point.
And then you started, Johnny Cash, Willie Nelson. You thought,
yeah.
but as a 5-year-old, listening to Sweet Slade, T-Rex, and then Boxcar Willie, Jim Reeves, it was a little bit like, what's going on? And there was songs about, I don't know, they had a lot of people who were sort of talking in tracks, weren't they, about a pack of playing cards in a church, and this person was kind of being told, what are you doing playing cards in church? And he said, oh, each of these cards represent some biblical moment. And he's like, oh, okay, and things, and Divorce. There was a song called D.I.V., wasn't there? Divorce. Remember Tammy?
Yes, D.I.V. or Loretta Lynn. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm with you. You know what? When I was a kid, I did not like country either, because I did not like what was on the radio. And if a friend's parents' car, because my parents were not playing that on the radio, but my friend's parents sometimes did, and I'd be like, and it took me years to appreciate it. And they weren't listening to George Jones. They were listening to.
Well, by the time you were listening to country,
great.
it was like
it was starting to turn into something else.
Unfunny. It was, I call it hat country.
Yeah, it was.
You got a cowboy hat doing country stuff, not like the real stuff like Hank Williams, Johnny Cash. Who
I just love now, and so now I have a full-on appreciation.
Yes, what would Hank do? That was such a great
exactly, and that's really what's informed our current project. Is a lot of because of John's older brother Bill, who absolutely that was his foundation musically, and so he wrote a lot of songs in that style, in the style of early 60s, late 50s country, Everly Brothers, Roy Orbison.
Oh, Everly Brothers, yes.
I loved the Everly Brothers in the 60s.
But they were country.
I know, that country too. But I'm with you on the other stuff.
Well, and early Elvis was country, but it was kind of interesting. So your 90s was kind of in sort of like all of us of a certain age. I think we started to, because there was also people like Victoria Williams and Lucinda Williams, and there was also in the 80s there had been Michelle Shocked and people like that. The singer-songwriter with Tracy Chapman and Suzanne Vega came along, and we were being sensitive 80s kids, all very liberal and
Victoria and Lucinda both guested with the Continental Drifters. We backed them up, both of them, in sets in Louisiana, in New Orleans. So they were.
It's so funny because Peter asked me, "Hey, do you want to play drums with
Lucinda?
No, with
Victoria.
Yeah.
Oh.
It never came to fruition, but
she's a character. I love her.
Amazing. And and there was Vic Chestnut as well, wasn't there, I believe?
Yes,
one of those many. So that was your 90s, which is obviously a good period. And also I did an interview with a guy from David who was in a band called David and David. I think they only did one album, but
yes, was it David Ricketts or was it David Bearwald?
Yes, the latter. Yes. And he'd sort of got together a kind of a combo doing sessions, and then they had Sheryl Crow, and they did that first album and this track Leaving Las Vegas, which was quite an amazing story in itself. So there was a sort of we started to embrace the singer-songwriter, didn't we, and stories. I think that was what we loved.
Yes. David Bearwald was definitely in my world. My day job at that time was working at a place called Laird Studios, which is an old movie lot. And David Ricketts from David and David was on the team. I was the lot superintendent's assistant and administrative assistant. And David was one of my guys. I was overseeing the team of like 14 guys, and he was a painter. That was his day job. Right around that, where David and David were just getting together and just made their record just after that. That's so awesome. All these threads, tie together.
I know. It's quite fascinating how we sort of circulate, and things get very organic as well. I think the sound, we started to embrace that sort of organic sound because the 90s. I mean, and I guess you would have watched it, but there was the film. There was Woodstock, and then there was Woodstock '99. So the 90s starts quite nicely, doesn't it, ish? But then ends in Woodstock '99. How did you feel about that horrendous kind of culture that went on during that period? How did you navigate that?
Well, I wasn't involved in it at all, and neither was John. You were just barely into back into music.
I didn't get back into music until '98, so I didn't pay attention to anything except I listened to my old records. I mean, that was it.
Like I said, the '90s for me was absolutely, we were ensconced in the singer-songwriter, Americana world, and that's really all I was paying attention to. That kind of culture of just, it wasn't even like punk rock rudeness. It was or ska.
No.
It was just unkind. And
it was very unkind. It was very mean.
Not my thing. Yeah. Not my thing at all.
So then we navigated the millennium bug and all that anxiety, but nothing particularly happened. So how did you spend the O years? What was your next decade like?
Well, interestingly, I shifted in 2002. The Continental Drifters were sort of drifted apart as we do, and John came back into my life. I'd known him since 1978. He had been inconveniently married to other people that entire time. And so he kind of came back into my life when he was touring with the Beach Boys. And I was just trying to figure out my next step. And I moved back to California to be with him. He had 2 children who were still in school at that time. Obviously, he was going to be a California boy at that point because his kids were there. And so I moved back to California to be with him. And we were married in 2003.
Right, so that was it. You suddenly had another career change.
Right.
So were you doing music at this stage? Did you sort of...
Not these two, no.
Us two, never.
No. We were having
we're domestic.
Very domestic life when he wasn't touring. And then, of course, in the year 2000,
and you were touring
I got
too.
back with the Bangles. And the Bangles kind of got back together. Actually, in 1999, got back together to record a song for the Spy Who Shagged Me film, and then from there we played the Hollywood Bowl with Sir George Martin, actually, and from there we just decided, okay, let's see what's going to happen here, and we started playing some shows and writing some more songs, and made a record. So I was back out in California with the Bangles, making music with the Bangles at that point. So interestingly enough, and we put out a 2003.
And was it a nice experience to sort of reconnect again after that kind of intense period in the 80s?
Yeah, it was, because we were careful about having a frank conversation when we first got back together. I made it very clear that I wasn't interested in doing a lot of the nostalgia package tours that were happening right then. I said, I'm not going to get back together and just play the old stuff. If we're going to reconvene as a band, I want it to be a musical entity where we are creating new stuff, and it's fun, and it's creative and vital, and we did that, and we wrote some really lovely songs at that time, and we toured, and we played old stuff, but we also got to play some of the new stuff too, and it was nice, actually. We had talked about stuff that didn't work for us in the past, and that was going to work going forward. So,
yes. God, that's
grown up of us, huh?
I would imagine. But did it feel slightly, without sounding corny, did it feel like a healing experience?
I would say so in the beginning. You fall into old patterns quite quickly. People change; they don't change that much.
Yes, this is true. There's habits, but I think people read the room better, don't they, when they get older? Hopefully,
I would hope so.
If you're wired the way you will, yeah.
Yes, well, it's always interesting, isn't it? So then, and for you, John, is it just the Beach Boys? I say just, but that's quite a key.
Yeah, I mean, they worked so much. They did like 180 shows a year, so there was no other time. I was on the road 80% of the year.
How do you cope? Because quite a few people, I remember the first time it happened was when I was doing an interview with Niels Lofgren. He said he only wanted to spend 3 weeks away from home because he'd get homesick. How do you cope with things like being away from your home?
At first, we had a rule, a 2-week rule, and Vicki, if she wasn't on tour, would come out and see me, or I, vice versa, would go see her. We tried to do that, but then as soon as you leave the country, it's a little more difficult to do that. And we just endured. I call it gig head. We both are very good at it. You don't want to leave home. It's like, I don't want to leave, but you're like a cat holding on to the post. No, don't take me. And then as soon as you go out the door, you go into gig head.
Right.
You just go
You're
into
now on the
that
road.
mode. I'm
Yep.
on the road. I'm working.
It's all
This
good.
is what I do for a living. I mean, it is. We're musicians, you know. I'm a touring musician. I'm not a big session guy. So, and at the time, it was really great because I needed the work. I was broke. I had nothing. I was living for a while. I lived in my car. I got day jobs, but this fell in my lap, and I thought it was only going to last 5 years, but it ended up being 23 years and gave me a career. But then I didn't know how to get out. They kept paying me,
Exit strategy.
and like
here.
for the last 3 years of the beach boying, it's like Vicki would always say, "So what's your B plan?" And like, I don't like B plans. There's no such thing as a B plan, because B plan means in my brain means something less. So I always would just say, well, no, when this is over, I'll have another A plan. You know, I don't work in, I don't think, what could I do? I always have flown by the seat of my pants. So fortunately I got fired.
Oh, right.
So we didn't have to worry about it.
Yeah. Didn't really know why, but I do know why. Yeah. But, I think when people say, I didn't do anything, I was a great employee. I was a great worker, but there were some things that I was not willing to put up with.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I think it got noticed, although I didn't make a big noise about it. It was just, anyway, so they let me go, and it was fine because I didn't know how to get out. And they're still all my friends, and I love them all, and especially the crew, because that's who I traveled with. I never traveled with the band. I only traveled with the crew.
Right.
Yeah,
They're the best.
They're the best crew.
Oh, yeah.
And the band guys are too, but they lead a band life, and it's like they want their hotel rooms and where's catering. And I'm kind of a middle class, worker. I'm a carpenter. I will cap shampoo. I keep it normal. I didn't pick my career. I wasn't 17 and said, I can't wait to be a rock star. I was 7 and I just did it. So it was kind of embarrassing most of the time. I want you to like me, but don't tell me.
Because you come from an amazing musical family, aren't you?
Yes.
This is like you are the Osmonds, basically, aren't you?
No, they are us, but yes.
Next Cowsills.
We are the first. We are the first family of rock music ever.
Yes, my God. So that leads to this new project album,
yes. Which actually began while he was still on the road.
Right.
And years and years ago, we started. It was an idea that we had
just a little over a decade ago.
We started, strangely, yes, it's not long ago.
Because I'm not a big writer, and I love these songs that are on the album. If you've heard them, my brother Bill, I've heard these songs forever. Sang a couple of them with him if he visited and stuff, and just I'm a fan of theirs. Their writing and musicality, and Barry too. Barry and I used to room, and he used to be writing songs in the bedroom at 13 and 14, and I'd be making faces in the mirror, goofing around, And so they're extraordinary creative forces, Bill and Barry Cowsill.
Yeah.
And they had a difficult time traversing the real world, and how it worked, but. We wanted to do this, and there's songs that I've always wanted to sing, and Vicki too.
Yeah.
And so we both decided, well, okay, let's do this. And we talked about it for a very long time, but it wasn't until I came across a friend from years ago who I met at 11 years old at the Ryman in 2017. His name's Paul Allen, and Paul is a very multi-instrumentalist and a great producer. And he just produced the new Jesus Lizard album.
Right.
Yeah. And so he came to our house. He says, what do you want to do? Well, talked about we called it the Dead Brothers Project, affectionately. And he says, okay, yeah. And so a couple of years went by, I think, knowing him. And I was playing with the Beach Boys in Memphis, and Paul calls me up. He lives in Nashville, which we're here right now, and rehearsing for coming up. Yeah.
And the Jesus Lizard are next door.
And the Jesus Lizard
don't
right
tell
next
anybody.
door. It's amazing. I just met them all. It's so wonderful. I know so much about them through Paul.
Yes.
But and so Paul calls me up. He says, "Hey, you're playing in Memphis. Do you want to go record at Sun Records?" And most people go, oh, gosh, yeah. And I went, why?
Why would I do that?
And he reminded me about this Dead Brothers project. He says, you've been talking about this thing forever. And so we went there, and the first song we recorded was a song my brother Bill and Jeffrey Hatcher, his writing partner, wrote called Is Anybody Here? Because it's such a Roy Orbison kind of song. We decided on recording that at Sun Records. And it's a beautiful song. And that started it. And Paul is the catalyst to get us going. He's constantly like, well, let's finish it now,
Right.
Get stuff done.
And without him, this would have never gotten made because we just be talking about it. We have a studio that we don't really know how to use. We can overdub vocals and send them to people. But he came in, he reworked the studio. We recorded drums, everything in our studio other than that one song at Sun Records. It was all done in our home studio.
My God, so you've learned how to use your home studio.
Yes.
Which is a double win. Because actually, it was interesting you mentioned that track, and Roy, because that was the next song on the album, Sound on Sound. And I thought, God, this reminds me of Pretty Woman. The start to it.
Oh, it is, that little guitar riff on Sound on Sound.
It is, that's my lust. I'm a huge Roy Orbison fan. My brother Bill and I are youngest and oldest boys. And our musical taste was so similar all the time. I just, and I wanted to be him. He was the best voice in our family, and we have similarities. I mean, all my family members have incredible voices and similarities to each other. If you gave a song to anyone Cowsill and they went in the studio and they did all the vocals themselves, it would come out and sound like anything we would have done.
Like the Cowsills.
It would still sound like the Cowsills. So we have this. And Vicki too. She's another vocal arranger, and I'm a vocal arranger, and it's just an interesting thing. But that's how that started. This project started.
So when did you record the first song then, which was the one you said, Is Anybody There? When was that first put down on sort of tape?
2000 and we'll go backwards. It's 25, 24, 23. 22, probably 22.
Yeah.
Right. So it was kind of during this sort of lockdown, the post-lockdown.
No. It was before that. It was longer ago than that because I was in New York in 22. So it was probably like 2019.
Yeah, 2019.
It's crazy. That long ago. So 6 years ago.
Right.
It wasn't until 2 years later that we all said, are you ever going to make the album? Let's do it, know? And we had just moved to New York because Vicki wanted to spend some time in New York and put it on her bucket list. I want to live in New York for a year. Yeah. So as soon as we go back there.
That was 2022. All of a sudden now John's still touring and I'm now commuting twice a month from New York to California. So not the most efficient way to make a record.
But it was fun and we did it.
Yes, we did.
And then in the middle of the recording is when I got the call from Mike Love saying they're going in a new direction. And
you can put that in quotes.
And it was funny, but I mean, it was just a funny day. And I said, great, that's fine. I love you. And all is good. That was the best job I ever had was being in the Beach Boys. And I thank Mike and the crew for making that a wonderful experience.
Absolutely.
I mean,
absolutely.
I can't complain about anything, man. They changed my life.
Yeah, that's great.
But having this project then to sort of ease from one sort of work to another must be quite nice to have a focus, because the thing about life sometimes can have what you focus on is so important because that's where your energy is flowing. God, I sound like a hippie here.
No, but you're right. It's very important.
Right,
and once he was sort of free of the touring life, we were able to focus. Okay, now we are going to finish this record. We're going to finish this record. We're going to do it. And we, even though we were slightly kicking and screaming, but Paul, he got us back into that studio and we finished it and we made a beautiful, beautiful record.
We did.
I got to say, and Paul gets a ton of credit for that.
Yeah.
But we made this record and we were able to focus on it. And now, sort of ironically in our lives, our long lives of music, both John and I are performing under our own names for the first time ever. You have to understand, I've always been in a band. He's always been in a band. We've never been, the lead singer.
I've always played drums for people.
He's always played drums. Now he's playing guitar on stage, and so it's all very new and exciting. And this is now our focus, right? For right now, and we'll see what happens after this. We're having a lot of fun, so there's no reason to stop having fun.
Yes, absolutely.
And my side gigs, I sing lead with the Smithereens.
Yes.
That's a
nice. That's a nice.
That's so fun. Oh my gosh, yeah.
And he also toured with Peter Parrott from The Only Ones.
Yeah.
Oh,
Over there.
His new album, The Cleansing.
Peter, my God, you are doing. You've got a lot on, actually, haven't you? So with the album, Long After the Fire. Actually, one of my favourite tracks on it is You in My Mind. I think that's one of the nicest songs, and it feels like a sort of an album which could have a side one and a side two, because actually I think I prefer the songs on the second side. I know, contrary or what.
Yep, gotcha.
I'm a country. I'm the first side, man. I'm the country guy.
I'm side two.
Yeah,
that's okay. And we talked about that.
We did.
If we did vinyl, we'd want to do side one and side two, but it didn't work out that way because
couldn't sequence it that
the
way.
CD, it would be confusing and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah.
Yes, I'm sort of, I think I must admit I like romantic melancholia is probably my favorite emotional state, and I felt that some of the songs on side two were that kind of tapped into those kind of sentiments.
Old Timeless, Vicki sings, the last song on it is so beautiful.
Yes.
And the one before that is the other very
When Hearts Collide.
Hearts Collide, that's the other
When Hearts Collide,
one, yes.
I love that song so much.
And Barry sang that at our wedding. So that's how tied we are into these songs.
It's all emotionally connected for us. I mean, seriously, trying to record this thing, I mean, I'd break down, it's like, fuck.
Yes, well, absolutely. Because it's quite, I guess there's kind of completes the circle in life, really. Not complete, but, it's like you've got other projects, but obviously it gives you a sense of sort of being able to sort of tap back and to give these songs new life, new energy, a new audience.
That's great for them and their kids. I mean, we don't own the publishing on this stuff.
Yeah.
We don't own the songs.
Hopefully it'll earn some money for the kids.
Hopefully it could earn some money for their kids and stuff. Seriously. So
yes.
It was a beautiful project.
We wanted to just give them another airing, shine some light on these songs again, because some of them you can find, some of them are very hard to find in their original state. Yeah. So
yes, and did you have more material that you could have recorded for it?
Oh yes,
absolutely.
There are other songs for sure.
A lot.
We had to winnow these 12.
So what dates have you got? Quite a few dates coming up now.
Yes, we don't have a long tour, but we're in Nashville right now. We're playing a couple shows here in Nashville, and then we're sort of scattered around. We're doing a whole series of sets in Southern California coming up in the at the end of the month, and then
you can go to Vicki and John, literally vickyandjohn.com.
That's that
right,
easy.
And that's got all the information on it. Fantastic.
All our tour dates, everything's there.
Where you can find all the music.
You can buy the album Long After the Fire or CD, or you may stream it. That's fine. We just into it.
Well, absolutely. This is incredible. And then also, Vicki, you're going to be inducted into the Women's Songwriters Hall of Fame.
How crazy is that?
We like that.
Yeah, I saw that Janice Ian was on that in the class, and that's sort of boggling my mind, to be honest.
Are we going to go? I haven't heard you. You haven't chimed in on the emails yet. Are we going?
I'm
it's Washington,
being shy
D.C.
about it. Yeah, I know.
I know she's being shy about it. We should go then. Okay, good.
Well, yes. Was that a surprise? Did it come from?
I had no idea that this was happening. It was a surprise email I got one day. I was like, wait, what?
Yeah, and we thought, is this a real thing?
Yeah,
because there's so many Hall of Fames, and I'm sorry, but some of them are just cash grabs to my brain. Everybody's got a Hall of Fame, but this one's a legitimate Hall of Fame show. So,
well, yes, and it's going to be, and the evening is the 21st of June, which in this country is the summer solstice. So,
exactly, well, it is everywhere. Actually,
it's a special thing to be
the
sure.
Summer solstice.
Yes. Do you feel now that one's kind of body of work and catalogue is getting slightly repraised and given a bit more credit or a bit more sort of kudos?
Yeah, there's been a little bit of attention on the Bangles and our history, our story, our herstory, as Cyndi Lauper would say. That there was our biography just came out recently, written by a very intelligent American woman who lives in the UK, Jennifer Otter Bickerdike, and so she wrote this great book, telling our story from soup to nuts, as it were, and so that just came out recently. We're working on a documentary, so there's some light shining on on what we were doing as a band that I do appreciate. And I hope people dig in and hear some of those stories, because it's pretty interesting.
Yes, I sort of realised when I started doing this show, which was, 80s indie bands mostly, there wasn't that much excitement about the 80s. But then recently, you must have seen endless books, documentaries,
Absolutely.
and it's kind of fascinating. Even bands that I wasn't that fond of, I still listen to the story because they're all got such a sort of crazy...
Everyone's got a story. Everyone's got a story.
They've got quite the story. And I mean, if you were able to whisper something to your 16-year-old self, is there anything in particular that you would have said, oh, yes, I would, even if that person ignored you?
Yes. I would say, stop worrying and just do it and have fun.
Right.
You should say that to this, Vicki.
Actually, a lot of people say, I wished we'd enjoyed it more at the time. We were all a bit...
Well, because you get wrapped up in things that aren't important, really, ultimately,
Yes.
and some things that you can't control, ultimately.
Yes.
So, yeah. His brother Bob tried to teach me this at the time. He was kind of mentoring me in a way while the Bangles were having hits. I was still in touch with Bob Cowsill, and he would always just say, you know what? It doesn't last. Enjoy it. Are you having fun? Are you having fun? He kept asking me. I was like, yeah, I'm having fun, but this and this and this is happening. He would just kind of, oh God, you're not listening.
Dr. Bob says that to the other kids too. He says, don't miss the ride.
Yeah.
He's right. He is right about that.
I think Bill Hicks said it's just the trip. It's just the trip. And what about you, John? What would you say to your 16-year-old self?
16-year-old John,
16-year-old. Yeah, I was having a good time. I don't know. I'm pretty much, I was really easygoing all the time. So I was just happy to be anywhere.
Was it a bit like Wavy Gravy, the path of less resistance? Did you get into things like Timothy Leary? Did you get tuned in, turned on and dropped out?
I was just born that way. I'm just easygoing. I mean, I think I'm easygoing. I mean, I just I don't want too much clutter in my head. I focus on one thing at a time, but I've always joked around. I just want to make people laugh, and I still do that, I don't know. I'm just want to have a great time and ride the world out,
Yes.
I'm a Pisces, so
I would tell 16,
I'm a Pisces too.
What she tell me?
I would tell 16-year-old John, you are a fantastic musician. Will you please just continue to play music and stop thinking that you can't do that?
16, I was still
You were
playing.
still doing it, I know.
I was still playing.
You had a couple more years.
Yeah, but she wanted me to, her and my sister tried to talk
Say it, finish. I was just
talk
responding.
me into being like a guy. They can't understand I never put a band together. I was always a guy waiting to be in a band.
In the early 80s,
I never started a band. I wouldn't know how to start a band.
Susan Cowsill and I went to him and said, you should be a country star. You have the looks, you have the voice, you have the inclination. You are that. And it was 1991.
Yeah, 91.
Yes.
In this meeting, we called him to my house, like a meeting, like, you come here. We have to talk to you. And because he wasn't doing anything, he wasn't playing music yet, and it was a lull in his professional career. And we were trying to, you love country, why aren't you doing it? You should have listened to us.
I know.
But anyway.
but I'm listening now, and side one, which is my favorite, and side two is your favorite.
There you go.
Yes. Well, I love your vocals, Vicki. So, I have to say it's sort of, it's there, there was something quite beautiful and I sort of resonated with it. So there you go. But I love the whole album. I know it's been lovely to hear the whole album, but there was, there's something about that vocal.
Okay, that's all the time we have now. No, I'm kidding.
Well, thank you ever so much.
Yeah.
Yes, good questions.
Thank
that
you
was
for
fun
the time
today.
travel.
Yes, the time we worked it out. Actually, I know that was a very subtle edit, but anyway, we then just start babbling about life and love and other bits and pieces, which is fascinating, but that's quite enough of that. Anyway, a massive thank you to both Vicki and John for giving me the time for that interview, talking about the new album. The Fool is the last one to know. No, that's the opening track of the album. The album is titled Long After the Fire, but anyway, you will be able to find that if you click on the link in the notes. But anyway, this has been the C86 show, David Eastaugh. If you have if you want to contact me, you can on all those social media platform sites. Just do C86 show. And also all these interviews have been archived on Spotify, iTunes, and also Podbean. Do check them out. Anyway, have a great week. Stay safe.